glass didn't shatter the way glass does in movies. It cracked. A spiderweb fracture that spread across the window of Marlowe's diner like something alive, reaching, searching for weak points in the structure. The sound came after, a percussion that made everyone in the diner drop their forks, their phones, their conversations. Everyone except Naomi. Naomi Reeves was refilling the napkin dispensers when the first gunshot hit the window. Her hands didn't shake. The metal dispenser didn't slip. When she set it down on table 6 with the same deliberate care she used for everything, then turned toward the door where 3 men in black masks were pushing through, guns raised, voices already shouting commands that overlapped into a single roar of threat and adrenaline. The diner had 12 customers. A businessman in booth 2 who hit the floor so fast his laptop skidded across the tile. A young couple near the back who grabbed each other and froze like deer. When an elderly woman by the jukebox who kept her hands in the air and her eyes closed, lips moving in silent prayer. The cook, Maurice, disappeared into the walk-in freezer. The other waitress, Crystal, screamed once and dove behind the counter so hard she knocked over an entire tray of glasses. Naomi stood exactly where she was, not because she was brave, not because she didn't understand danger, but because her body had learned a long time ago that sometimes the safest thing you can do is become very, very still. Predators chase movement. Men with guns chase fear. So she gave them neither. Before we continue, if you believe in stories about real love, second chances, and people who refuse to stay broken and want these for yourself, you're in the right place. Hit subscribe and join a family that values real love and depth. Also comment where you're from, my people. Now back to Naomi. She looked at the man in the center, the one with the shotgun, the one whose mask had a small tear near the mouth where she could see a sliver of brown skin, a hint of stubble, the shape of lips pressed thin with nerves. He was young, she could tell by his build, lean but not filled out yet, the kind of body that still remembered being a boy. "Say," he said, his voice cracked on the word. "Open the safe, now." Naomi looked at him the way you look at rain when you've already been soaked, with acceptance, with the exhaustion of someone who has weathered too many storms to be surprised by another. "We don't have a safe," she said. Her voice was calm, not the false calm of someone trying to placate, the real calm of someone stating a fact. The diner was too small for a safe. The register had maybe $300 in it. Morris kept the week's earnings in a lockbox in his car because the insurance was cheaper that way. The gunman blinked behind his mask. He hadn't expected words. He'd expected screaming or silence, or the frantic scramble of people giving him what he wanted. Naomi offered none of it. "Don't lie to me," he said. The shotgun lifted toward her face. "I'm not lying," Naomi said. "You picked the wrong place." In the corner booth, a man in a charcoal suit set his teacup down without making a sound. His hands were steady. His face was composed. But something behind his eyes shifted, a locked door being forced open from the inside. Jian-yu hadn't moved when the window cracked. Not because of the guns, because of the voice. That voice. He knew that voice. Jian-yu's men were seated across from him. 2 of them, silent, efficient, the kind of men who wore violence like a second suit. The moment the gunman entered, they both reached inside their jackets. Instinct, training, the muscle memory of men who lived in a world where guns were grammar. Jian-yu raised one hand, a small gesture. "Palm out. Stop." His men froze. Jian-yu's eyes were locked on the woman behind the counter. Not on the gunman, not on the weapons. On her. On the way she stood with her shoulders level and her breathing even, while everyone else in the diner had stopped breathing entirely. On the way her hands rested at her sides, not raised. It not trembling, just there, present, like the guns were weather. And on her voice, the timbre of it, the exact frequency that had lived in his chest for 9 years like a scar he never showed anyone. The gunman was shouting now, something about the register, something about hurry up. His voice pitched higher with every syllable, the desperation leaking through the mask like sweat. Naomi walked to the register, slowly, not the frantic rush of someone trying to appease, when the measured pace of someone who had already decided this situation would end a certain way, and was simply moving through the steps to get there. She opened the register. The drawer slid out with a mechanical ding that sounded absurdly cheerful. She pulled out the bills, 300s, a stack of 20s, a rubber-banded bundle of 5s and 1s. She set it all on the counter in a neat pile. "That's it," she said. $347. The gunman stared at the money. You could see the moment the reality landed. The moment he understood he'd walked into a diner with 2 accomplices and 3 guns for less money than it cost to fix a car. "That's it?" His voice was raw now, the bravado stripping away to reveal the panic underneath. "That's it," Naomi confirmed. "There's got to be more. In the back. There's not." The gunman's hand shook. The shotgun dipped, then rose again, then dipped. He was losing his grip on the situation. Losing his grip on the story he'd told himself about how this would go. Naomi looked at him. Really looked at him. And when she spoke, her voice was softer, not kind. Naomi wasn't kind to men with guns, but human. The voice of someone who had seen enough bad decisions to recognize one unfolding in real time. "You don't want to do this," she said. Not a plea, a fact. "You came in here for $300 on a Thursday morning. You're wearing new shoes. Your mask is a t-shirt you cut up. But you didn't plan this. You're desperate. I understand desperate. But this won't fix it. Whatever you need this money for, this won't be enough. And what you'll lose will be everything." The diner was silent. Even the man on the floor had stopped moving. Everyone was holding their breath. The gunman stared at her. Behind the mask, his eyes were wide, wet. The eyes of a boy who had convinced himself he could do something terrible and was realizing in real time that he couldn't. His arm dropped. Just a few inches. "Enough." One of the other gunmen grabbed his shoulder. "What are you doing? Take it. Let's go." But the boy was still looking at Naomi, like she was a mirror, like she was showing him something he couldn't unsee. "Go," Naomi said quietly, "before you can't take it back." The boy turned. He grabbed the money from the counter. His hand shook so badly the bills fluttered. He shoved them into his pocket and stumbled toward the door. The other 2 gunmen followed. The door swung shut behind them. The fractured window caught the morning light and scattered it across the floor in 1,000 pieces. Sirens rose in the distance. Crystal emerged from behind the counter, her face streaked with tears. The businessman sat up, breathing hard. The elderly woman opened her eyes and looked around like she'd just woken from a dream. Naomi picked up the napkin dispenser from table 6. She continued filling it, 1 napkin at a time. Her hands didn't shake. Jian-yu stood. His men stood with him. He pulled a money clip from his pocket and peeled off $500 bills. He set them on the table, anchored under the edge of his saucer. He didn't walk to the counter. He didn't speak to her. He didn't ask her name. But as he passed table 6, he stopped, just for a second, just long enough to let his eyes meet hers. Naomi looked up. Their eyes locked, and something in the air between them compressed. A recognition that wasn't recognition. A familiarity that had no name. Jian-yu's jaw tightened. He looked away first. He walked out of the diner, his men flanking him, and climbed into the black car waiting at the curb. The door closed. The engine started, but the car didn't move. Jian-yu sat in the back seat with his hands folded in his lap and his eyes closed and his breathing controlled in the way of a man who was trying very hard not to break something. "Sir?" His driver's voice was careful. Jian-yu didn't respond. But he was listening to the echo of a voice from 9 years ago, a voice that had saved his life. He opened his eyes. He pulled out his phone. He dialed a number he had memorized but never called. "The waitress," he said. "The one from this morning. I need everything." A pause on the other end. "Everything, sir? Her name, her address, her history, everything." He hung up. He leaned back against the seat. The rain started. Soft at first, then harder, drumming against the roof of the car like a heartbeat. Behind his closed eyelids, he could still see her. 21 years old, a stranger in a diner at 4 in the morning, a woman who had no reason to sit down across from a broken man, but did anyway. He had found her 9 years ago. Jian-yu sat in a diner at 4 o'clock in the morning and thought about dying. He was 23. His father had been dead for 8 days. The funeral was held in a language he barely spoke, in a country he barely knew, paid for with money he didn't have. The men who attended, his father's associates, the ones who wore dark suits and spoke in low voices and never made eye contact for too long, had come and gone without offering a single word of comfort. They came to confirm the death, to measure the vacuum, to decide which pieces of the empire were worth picking up and which could be left to rot. Jian-yu was the piece they left. He hadn't eaten in 3 days. He had $60 to his name. His apartment, if you could call a room above a laundromat with no heat in apartment, was waiting for him 4 blocks away. But he couldn't go back, couldn't sit in that silence, couldn't stare at the wall his father had leaned against during his last visit 2 weeks before the heart attack, when he looked at Jian-yu with something that might have been pride or might have been pity and said nothing at all. So Jian-yu sat in the diner instead. Corner booth, horror tea he hadn't touched, rain on the windows. The waitress had stopped checking on him an hour ago. The cook was scraping the grill in the back. The place was empty except for Jian-yu and the specific kind of quiet that only exists at 4 o'clock in the morning when the world has forgotten you're alive. He was thinking about the bridge 7 blocks east. He had walked past it on the way here, had stood at the railing for 13 minutes. He counted. 13 minutes of looking at black water and thinking about how easy it would be to stop carrying the weight of a name that had given him nothing except debt and enemies, and a father who died in a foreign country without ever saying he loved him. He didn't jump, but he didn't walk away because he wanted to live. He walked away because his legs moved before his mind decided. Muscle memory, survival instinct, the body choosing for the brain. And he ended up in the diner because it was the first place with lights on. The door opened. He didn't look up. Someone sat down across from him. He still didn't look up. He assumed it was the waitress. He assumed she was going to ask him to order something or leave. "Whatever you're thinking about doing," a voice said, "it can wait until morning." He looked up. She was young, 21 maybe, black, beautiful in a way that wasn't trying to be. No makeup, hair pulled back in a simple ponytail. Oh, a college hoodie 2 sizes too big. A backpack slung over one shoulder like she'd come straight from a library or a late shift or both. Her eyes were tired, but steady. She was looking at him the way no one had looked at him in weeks. Directly, without agenda, without calculation. "I don't know what you mean," he said. His voice sounded hollow even to himself. "Yes, you do," she said. Not unkind, just certain. He stared at her. She didn't flinch. She didn't look away. She sat there in that booth like she had every right to be there. Like sitting across from a stranger at 4 o'clock in the morning was the most natural thing in the world. She stayed for an hour. She didn't ask his name. She didn't ask what happened. She talked about small things, a paper she was writing, a professor who graded like he had a personal vendetta, a song she'd heard on the walkover that she couldn't get out of her head. She bought him a refill with crumpled bills she pulled from her backpack like the money mattered, and she was spending it anyway. She talked to him like he was a person sitting in a diner, not a man sitting on the edge of something terrible. When she left, she zipped her backpack and looked at him with those tired, steady eyes. "Get home safe," she said, like it was simple, like staying alive was just something you did. She walked out into the rain and didn't look back. Jian-yu sat in that booth for another hour. He didn't go to the bridge. He went home. He slept. He woke up the next morning and started building the life that would make him untouchable. Every decision, every alliance, every ruthless calculation that followed, all of it began the morning after a stranger sat across from him in a diner and told him to wait until morning. He never got her name. He never saw her face again, but he heard her voice every single day for 9 years. When the video hit the internet at 5:32 that evening, Naomi didn't know about it until her younger sister Trinity called her. "Girl, you're famous," Trinity said without preamble. Her voice had that edge to it, the one that meant she didn't know whether to be excited or worried. Naomi was sitting on the couch in her small apartment, her feet aching in the cheap sneakers she'd been meaning to replace for 4 months. She had a microwave dinner on her lap that she hadn't touched, and the television was on but muted. She was staring at the wall. "What are you talking about?" Naomi said. "Check your phone. Twitter, Instagram, everywhere. Someone recorded the whole thing." Naomi's stomach dropped. She set the dinner aside and picked up her phone. 37 missed calls, 63 text messages. Her social media notifications were in the hundreds. She opened Twitter. The video was the first thing on her timeline. The footage was shaky. Shot from under a table by someone whose hands were trembling so badly the frame bounced every few seconds. But Naomi was clear, perfectly clear, standing behind the counter with her hands at her sides, looking at a masked man with a shotgun like he was a mild inconvenience. The audio was muffled, but her voice cut through. Calm, steady, unbothered. The caption read, "Waitress doesn't even flinch during armed robbery. She really said, not today." It had 600,000 views. Naomi watched it once. She didn't recognize herself. The woman in the video looked fearless. The woman sitting on her couch felt like her chest was caving in. "Naomi?" Trinity's voice was sharp. "You still there?" "Yeah." "Are you okay?" "I'm fine." "You don't sound fine." "Trinity, I have to go." "Wait." Naomi hung up. She put the phone face down on the couch. She stood up. She walked to the kitchen. She poured herself a glass of water. Her hands were shaking now that it was over. And now that no one was watching. She drank the water in 3 long swallows. She set the glass in the sink. She went to her bedroom and sat on the edge of her bed with her hands pressed together between her knees. She didn't cry. She hadn't cried in 6 years. Not since the night she packed a bag and left the apartment she shared with Marcus. Not since she walked out into the rain at 2 o'clock in the morning with her hands shaking so badly she could barely hold the suitcase. She didn't cry, but she sat there in the dark for a long time. The call from her boss came at 8 o'clock the next morning. Naomi was already dressed for her shift. Hair pulled back, uniform on, keys in her hand. She picked up on the first ring. "Naomi, it's Paul." She knew from his voice. She knew before he said another word. From the tone, from the hesitation, from the specific silence that comes before someone delivers bad news they've already decided is not their problem. "One people are calling the diner," Paul said. "Reporters, some news blog. I've had 5 calls this morning asking about you by name." A pause. Naomi waited. "I can't have that kind of attention here," Paul continued. "You understand?" She understood. The diner operated on the margins. Half the staff paid under the table. Health inspections handled with cash handshakes. A kitchen that wouldn't survive a camera crew walking through the door. Naomi wasn't being fired for the robbery. She was being fired because the robbery made people look, and the diner couldn't afford to be looked at. "I get it," Naomi said. "I'm sorry, Naomi. You're a good worker. I just can't." "I said I get it, Paul." She hung up. She stood in the hallway of her apartment with her keys in one hand and her phone in the other. She let the silence hold her for exactly 5 seconds. Then she put the keys on the hook. She took off the uniform. She hung it in the closet even though she'd never wear it again. Shorty, because that's who she was. Someone who put things away properly even when the floor was falling out beneath her. Trinity was at school. The apartment was quiet. Naomi sat at the kitchen table with her laptop and started searching for jobs. Waitressing, bartending, cashier, anything that paid weekly and didn't ask too many questions. She updated a resume that was mostly gaps and half-truths. The college she never finished, the years she couldn't explain, the references she didn't have because every time she rebuilt her life, the old one burned behind her. She applied to 14 places before noon. She ate lunch standing at the counter. Leftover rice, cold, 2 bites between applications. She didn't cry. She didn't call anyone. There was no one to call. By the time Trinity came home at 3 o'clock, the uniform was hidden and dinner was started, and Naomi was sitting at the table like it was any other Thursday. "How was school?" Naomi asked. "Oh, fine," Trinity said. She dropped her backpack by the door. "How was work?" "Fine." Trinity looked at her the way she'd been looking at her for 6 years, like she knew Naomi was lying, but loved her too much to say it. Naomi looked back the way she always did, like everything was handled. It wasn't, but it would be. It always was. Naomi Reeves didn't break. She adjusted, she pivoted. She found the next handhold and gripped it until her knuckles went white. Then she found the one after that. That's what she did. That's what she'd always done. The knock came on a Saturday afternoon, 2 days after the firing. Naomi was at the kitchen table, circling job listings in a newspaper she'd picked up from the corner store because her laptop had died that morning and she couldn't afford to fix it yet. She was still in the clothes she'd slept in. Her hair was pulled back. She hadn't eaten since the night before because Trinity needed breakfast. And there were 2 eggs left, and Naomi wasn't going to be the one who took them. She opened the door and knew immediately. The suit was the first thing she saw. Dark, tailored, the kind of suit that cost more than 4 months of her rent. Then the shoes, polished. Wrong for this hallway. Then the car parked on the street below, visible through the stairwell window. Black, long, idling with a driver behind tinted glass. The man wearing the suit was Asian, late 20s, maybe early 30s. Tall, still in a way that had nothing to do with patience and everything to do with control. His face was composed. His hands were at his sides. He looked at her the way people look at something they've been searching for. Not with surprise, with confirmation. "Naomi Reeves," he said. "Not interested," she said. He blinked, just once. "I haven't said anything yet." "You don't need to. I can see the suit. I can see the car. And whatever you're selling, whatever you're offering, whatever you think you know about me from a video on the internet, I don't want it." She started to close the door. He didn't put his hand out to stop it. He didn't step forward. He just spoke. "I own a restaurant in Midtown. Legitimate, clean. I need someone with experience managing front of house. The pay is 4 times what the diner offered. The hours are better, health insurance, no cameras." Naomi paused. The door was 6 inches from closed. She could see him through the gap. One eye, half a jaw, the knot of a tie that probably cost more than her refrigerator. "Why me?" she asked. "Because I saw how you handled that situation, and I need someone who doesn't panic." "In a restaurant?" "In my restaurant, yes." She almost laughed. Almost. The kind of laugh that lives in the back of your throat when something is so absurd it circles around to insulting. A man in a $10,000 suit showing up at her apartment offering her a restaurant job because he saw a video of her not screaming during a robbery. "I don't know you," Naomi said. "I don't know what you actually want. And I don't take favors from men I don't know. Every favor I've ever accepted came with a price I didn't agree to." She said it without heat, without anger. Just the flat, clear tone of a woman who had learned the hard way that kindness from powerful men was rarely kind. Jian-yu looked at her for a long moment. Then he reached into his jacket and pulled out a business card. Plain, white, a name and a number in embossed black letters. He held it out through the gap in the door. "If you change your mind," he said. She didn't take it. He set it on the floor in front of her door. He nodded once. He turned and walked down the hallway and didn't look back. Naomi listened to his footsteps on the stairs. Steady, unhurried. The walk of a man who had never been rushed by anything in his life. She closed the door. She locked it. She went back to the kitchen table and sat down and picked up her pen and looked at the circled listings. She didn't think about the card on the floor. She didn't think about it for 2 days. The eviction notice came on Monday, slid under the door in a yellow envelope she didn't need to open to know what it said. Trinity's shoes had a hole in the left sole that she'd been stuffing with newspaper. The fridge had mustard, half a loaf of bread, and tap water. Naomi had $42 in her account and 14 applications out and not a single callback. She sat at the table on Monday night after Trinity went to sleep. The apartment was dark. The yellow envelope was on the counter. The business card was still on the floor by the front door where Jian-yu had left it. She hadn't picked it up, or she hadn't thrown it away. She didn't want to think about what that meant. She thought about it anyway. At midnight, she walked to the door. She picked up the card. She looked at the name embossed in black. Kim Jian-yu, proprietor Hanol. She looked at the number. She stood there for a long time with the card in one hand and her phone in the other. Then she dialed. It rang once. He answered like he'd been waiting. "The job," she said. "Just the job. Nothing else." "Just the job," he confirmed. She hung up without saying goodbye. She put the card in the kitchen drawer. She went to bed. And across the city in a penthouse office overlooking the financial district, Jian-yu set his phone down on the mahogany desk and leaned back in his chair and exhaled for the first time in 2 days. The restaurant was called Hanol. It sat on the 3rd floor of a building in Midtown that looked like nothing from the outside and everything from the inside. Dark wood, clean lines, night low lighting that made every table feel like a private conversation. The menu was modern Korean fusion. The clientele was wealthy. The staff moved like they'd been trained to be invisible. Naomi started on a Tuesday. She arrived 20 minutes early, tied her apron with the efficiency of someone who had been doing this since she was 19, memorized the floor plan before the first customer arrived. By the end of her first shift, she knew every server's name, every table number, and which dishes the kitchen was slow on. By the end of her first week, the floor manager stopped checking her sections because there was nothing to check. She was good at this. She had always been good at this. Not because she loved it, but because she refused to be bad at anything that kept her sister fed. She moved through the dining room the way she moved through everything, with precision, with control, and with a wall between herself and every person in the room that was so seamless, most people didn't even know it was there. She didn't flirt. She didn't ask questions. She didn't linger. She clocked in. She worked. She clocked out. She went home to Trinity. Jian-yu noticed everything. He had an office on the 4th floor, glass walls that overlooked the dining room from above. He used it 3 or 4 nights a week. His men assumed he came to handle business. He did, but he also watched the floor. He watched her, not obviously, not the way men usually watch women, not with hunger or ownership or the need to be noticed watching. He watched her the way he watched rivals across negotiating tables, with attention, with patience, with the specific focus of a man trying to understand something that didn't fit his existing categories. Naomi didn't fit. Everyone in Jian-yu's orbit operated on the same frequency: deference, caution, the constant low hum of people trying to stay in his good graces. Naomi operated on no frequency at all. She didn't adjust her voice when she knew he was nearby. She didn't smile more or talk less or straighten her posture. She treated him exactly the way she treated every other person in the building, with professional courtesy, and absolutely nothing beyond it. It unsettled him. He was not a man who was easily unsettled. The scheduling incident happened in her 3rd week. Jian-yu came down to the floor on a Saturday evening during full service. Once something had gone wrong with the reservations. A double booking. 2 parties arriving at the same time for the same table. The floor manager was sweating. The hostess was frozen. Jian-yu stepped in and started rearranging the seating chart himself, moving names around with the quiet authority of a man who expected his decisions to be executed without question. "That won't work," Naomi said. The room didn't go silent. It went airless. The floor manager looked at the ground. The hostess stopped breathing. 2 servers at the bar turned their heads slowly, like witnesses to something they weren't sure they wanted to see. Naomi was standing 3 feet from Jian-yu with a tray balanced on one hand and an expression that suggested she hadn't noticed the temperature in the room had dropped 30 degrees. She pointed at the chart with her free hand. "Table 9 has a regular who always sits there on Saturdays. You move her and she'll complain for the next month. I put the second party at 11. Same size. They won't know the difference." She said it the way she said everything. Flat, certain, without apology. Like being right was more important than being careful. Like the fact that every person in the room was terrified of the man she was correcting hadn't occurred to her. Or had occurred to her and simply didn't matter. Jian-yu looked at her. She looked back. The tray didn't wobble. Her eyes didn't drop. 4 seconds passed. He looked at the chart. And he moved the second party to table 11. He said nothing. He walked back toward the stairs. Naomi delivered her drinks. The room exhaled. That night, after the last customer left and the lights came up and the staff filed out into the cold, Jian-yu sat alone in his 4th floor office. The dining room was dark below. The chair across from his desk was empty. The building was silent. He thought about the way she said, "That won't work." No hesitation, no softening, no fear. He almost smiled. He didn't. But it was close. It started with small things. Naomi didn't notice at first because she was trained not to notice. Trained by years of keeping her head down and her walls up and her attention on the only things that mattered. The job, the paycheck, Trinity. Everything else was noise. Everything else was a door she didn't need to open. But the small things kept happening. The first time was on a Wednesday. Naomi was closing, wiping tables, flipping chairs, and running through the checklist the floor manager left on a clipboard by the bar. The restaurant was empty. The kitchen was dark. She assumed she was alone until she heard the creak of a chair from the 4th floor and looked up through the glass walls of the office and saw Jian-yu sitting at his desk with papers in front of him and the look of a man who had nowhere else to be. She went back to wiping tables. 15 minutes later, he came downstairs carrying 2 cups. He set one on the table she just cleaned. Tea, no milk, no sugar. She hadn't told him how she took her tea. He had watched her make it for herself 4 times in the break room and remembered. "You didn't have to do that," she said. "I know," he said. He sat down across from her with his own cup and didn't say anything else. They sat in the empty restaurant for 25 minutes. She finished her tea. He finished his. They talked about nothing. Watched the construction on 8th Avenue that was making deliveries late. A customer that evening who had sent back the same dish twice and then left a 50% tip. Naomi told the story without smiling, but her voice had something in it that was close. Jian-yu listened the way he always listened, completely. Like whatever she was saying was the only sound in the world. She didn't ask about the men who came through the back entrance. She didn't ask about the phone calls he took in Korean with his jaw tight and his voice low. She didn't ask about any of it because she understood boundaries better than anyone. She had built enough of them to recognize when someone else's were load-bearing. The second time was a Friday, same routine. Closing, empty restaurant. He came downstairs. This time he didn't bring tea. He just sat at the bar while she finished and opened his laptop and worked in silence while she moved through her checklist. They didn't speak for 40 minutes. It should have been uncomfortable. It wasn't. The third time she noticed his hand. He was reaching for his cup and his sleeve pulled back, and she saw the bruising across his knuckles. Deep purple fading to yellow at the edges, the kind that doesn't come from bumping into a cabinet. She looked at it for half a second. She didn't stop wiping the counter. She didn't look at his face. "You should ice that," she said. He pulled his sleeve down. "It's fine." "It's not fine, it's swollen. Ice it when you get home, or it'll be worse tomorrow." She said it the same way she said everything. Direct, unbothered. Like caring about someone's hand was just practical information and not something that meant anything deeper. But Jian-yu looked at her when she said it, and something shifted in his expression. Not surprise. Not gratitude. Something quieter. The look of a man who had 100 people around him at all times, and none of them noticed when he was hurt. He iced it when he got home. He didn't tell her that. Naomi took the train home that night. Trinity was asleep. The apartment was dark. She dropped her bag by the door and sat on the edge of her bed without turning on the light. Her shoes were still on. Her coat was still on. She sat there with her hands in her lap and felt something moving beneath the surface of her chest. Slow, warm, dangerous. She recognized it immediately. The pull, the quiet but treacherous gravity of starting to care about someone. The first thread of attachment that, if she let it, would weave itself into something she couldn't cut without bleeding. She had felt it before, with Marcus, and she remembered exactly how that ended. She took off her shoes. She took off her coat. She got into bed and stared at the ceiling and told herself it was nothing. Just tea, just silence, just a bruised hand she happened to notice. But she lay awake for a long time, and when she finally slept, she dreamed about an empty restaurant and a man who remembered how she took her tea. Marcus didn't knock. He leaned on the buzzer until Trinity opened the door. Because that's how Marcus had always operated. Not with force, but with persistence. With the slow, grinding pressure of a man who understood that patience was just another form of control. Naomi was in the kitchen when she heard Trinity say, "She doesn't want to see you." The words were steady, but Trinity's voice was young, 17, and Naomi could hear the edge in it. The sound of a girl trying to be a wall when she was still learning how to be a door. Naomi came around the corner and saw Marcus standing in the hallway, and her body did something her mind had no say in. She stopped. Not the way she stopped at the diner. Calm, deliberate, in control. This was different. This was a full system shutdown. Her feet stopped. Her hands stopped. Her breathing stopped. Every muscle in her body locked into a position she hadn't held in 6 years, but that her bones remembered like a language she thought she'd forgotten. Marcus hadn't changed. That was the worst part. He looked exactly the same. Tall, lean, handsome in the way that made people trust him before they knew better. His smile was the same. Easy, warm, The kind of smile that made you feel chosen until you realized it was a leash. "Naomi," he said, like a greeting. Like 6 years of nothing hadn't happened. Like the last time she saw him, she hadn't been packing a bag at 2 o'clock in the morning, with her hands shaking so badly she couldn't zip it. "Leave," she said, but the word came out wrong. Too quiet, too thin. The voice that had stared down a gunman in a diner, steady, unbothered, carved from stone, was gone. In its place was the voice Marcus had spent 3 years building. The small one, the careful one, the one that asked permission before it spoke. He stepped into the apartment without being invited. He didn't touch her. He never needed to. He just filled the space the way he always did, with his body, his height, his ease, his certainty that every room he entered belonged to him. "Saw your video," he said. "You're famous now." He looked around the apartment, the small kitchen, the secondhand furniture, the crack in the ceiling she hadn't been able to fix. His eyes cataloged everything, and she could feel him doing the math. The quiet calculation of a man measuring how far she'd fallen so he could remind her she'd never rise. "Still doing this, huh?" he said, not a question. Trinity was standing behind Naomi with her fists tight at her sides and her jaw clenched, and Naomi could feel her sister's anger radiating like heat. Trinity was 17. She was built like their father, tall, strong, and she hated Marcus with a clarity that Naomi envied, because her own feelings about the man standing in her kitchen were so tangled she couldn't find the ends. "You need to go," Trinity said. Marcus didn't look at her. He looked at Naomi. He always looked at Naomi, because he knew, had always known, that she was the lock and everyone else was just furniture. "I just came to check on you," he said, soft, gentle. The voice, the one that used to come after the silence, after the coldness, after the days of being ignored until she was so desperate for warmth she'd accept any version of it, even the kind that burned. Naomi said nothing. She stood in her own kitchen, in her own apartment, and said nothing, because her mouth wouldn't open and her voice wouldn't come. And the woman who told a robber he picked the wrong place was nowhere to be found. Marcus stayed for 8 minutes. He talked. She didn't. When he left, he touched her shoulder on the way out. Just a brush. Just enough. Yeah, and she flinched so hard Trinity made a sound behind her, like something inside her broke. The door closed. Naomi didn't move. Trinity was already in the kitchen, pulling open the junk drawer, where Naomi kept the business card she thought she'd hidden. Trinity didn't ask permission. She dialed the number on the card. It rang twice. "Hanul," a voice said. "I need to speak to Kim Jian-yu," Trinity said. Her voice was shaking but firm. "Tell him it's about Naomi Reeves. I tell him it's urgent." Jian-yu arrived in 18 minutes. He came alone. No car, no driver. He took a taxi and dismissed it at the curb. He knocked once, gently. Trinity opened the door and stepped aside without a word. Naomi was sitting at the kitchen table. Her hands were flat on the surface. Her eyes were dry. She looked exactly the way she looked in the diner. Still, composed, unreadable. But Jian-yu saw what everyone else would have missed. The slight tremor in her left hand. When the way her jaw was clenched so tight the muscle flickered. The way her eyes were focused on a point on the wall that wasn't there. She wasn't calm. She was holding herself together with everything she had, and it was costing her every ounce of strength she possessed. "He's gone," Trinity said quietly from the hallway. Jian-yu nodded. He didn't sit down. He didn't move toward Naomi. He stood in the doorway of her kitchen and waited. When Naomi finally spoke, her voice was low and shaking and furious. "Don't," she said. "I didn't say anything. Don't look at me like that. Don't stand there like you need to fix this. I don't need you here. I didn't call you. I didn't ask for this." Her voice cracked on the last word. Not from sadness, from rage. At Marcus for showing up. At Trinity for calling. At Jian-yu for standing in her kitchen with that look on his face. The one that said he saw her, really saw her. Not the woman from the diner. Not the waitress who didn't flinch. But the woman underneath. The one who froze in her own home because a man she left 6 years ago walked through the door and her body forgot every wall she'd built since. She was furious at herself. For freezing. For going small. For becoming the version of herself she had spent 6 years dismantling brick by brick. And in the space of 8 minutes, Marcus had rebuilt it all. Jian-yu didn't argue. He didn't leave. But he stood in her doorway and took every word the same way she had taken the gun in the diner, without flinching. "I'll be outside," he said. "If you need anything." He left. He sat on the stairwell 1 floor down for 2 hours. Naomi didn't come out. He didn't expect her to. When he finally stood and walked down to the street, he looked up at her window. The light was off, but she was sitting by it. He couldn't see her, but she could see him. Winning, and she watched him walk to the corner and disappear into the dark. And she pressed her forehead against the cold glass and breathed. Naomi didn't come to work the next day, or the day after. On the third day, Jian-yu drove to her apartment. He didn't send a car. He didn't send one of his men. He came himself, because something told him this wasn't a conversation that could be delegated. She opened the door on the second knock. She was dressed. Her hair was pulled back. Her eyes were clear and hard and ready for exactly this moment. She had been expecting him, maybe even waiting. "Don't," she said. "You haven't been at work." "I'm not coming back." She said it the way she said everything. Flat, final, a door closing with no handle on the outside. She stood in the doorway with one hand on the frame, like a woman guarding the last space on earth that belonged to her. And she looked at him with an expression that dared him to argue. He didn't argue, so he stood in the hallway and waited. "I don't need this," Naomi said. "I don't need you showing up at my door every time something goes wrong in my life. I don't need a man in a suit deciding when I need help and how much and what kind." Her voice was rising, not shouting. Naomi didn't shout, but the volume was climbing in a way that told Jian-yu the words had been sitting in her chest for days, pressing against her ribs like something alive. "I've had that. I've lived inside that. A man who showed up with answers I didn't ask for and solutions I didn't want, and made me feel like I owed him something for every single one." She took a breath. Her hand tightened on the door frame. "You don't know me. You saw a video. You saw a woman who didn't cry when a gun was in her face, and you decided that was interesting. You gave me a job. You brought me tea. You showed up at my apartment at midnight because my 17-year-old sister called you. And now you're here again. Yeah, but standing in my hallway, looking at me like I'm something you need to fix." She paused. Her jaw worked. "I am not something you fix. I am not a project. I am not a debt you owe. I don't need your money. I don't need your power. I don't need another man standing in my doorway telling me he knows what's best for me. Because the last one who did that spent 3 years taking me apart piece by piece until I couldn't recognize my own face in the mirror." The hallway was silent. A door opened somewhere on the floor below and closed again. The building hummed with the low frequency of other people's lives, continuing while 2 people stood 3 feet apart with 9 years of unspoken history between them. Jian-yu took every word without moving. His expression didn't change. His posture didn't shift. He stood in the hallway the same way she had stood behind that counter, absorbing the impact without flinching, letting it land, letting it stay. Then he spoke, quietly, she without defense. "I'm not here because I think you're weak," he said. "I'm here because 9 years ago, a woman I'd never met saw me through a window at 4 o'clock in the morning and walked into a diner she had no reason to enter." Naomi's hand loosened on the door frame. Her lips parted, but no sound came out. "I was 23 years old," Jian-yu continued. "My father had just died. I had nothing. I was no one. And I was sitting in that booth deciding whether or not to stay alive." The hallway contracted. The light from her apartment fell across both of them in a yellow stripe that cut the floor in half. "She sat across from me," Jian-yu said. "She didn't ask my name. She didn't ask what was wrong. She just sat there and talked to me like I was a person. She bought me tea with money I could tell she didn't have. She stayed for an hour. And when she left, she said something I've never forgotten." He looked at her, not at the waitress, not at the woman from the video, at her. "That woman was you, Naomi." The hallway compressed further. The air became thick, heavy with the weight of recognition. Naomi stared at him. Her jaw was tight, her eyes were wet, but nothing fell. "I don't remember you," she whispered. "I know. I don't remember your face. I know. But you remember the night." She did. She could see it. Not clearly, not completely. But in fragments. A diner. Rain. A young man with his head down and his hands shaking and tea going cold in front of him. She had been 21, walking home from the library. She saw him through the glass, and something in the way he was sitting made her stop, made her go inside, made her sit down across from a stranger because he looked like a person who was running out of reasons. "Whatever you're thinking about doing," she said softly, the memory surfacing. "It can wait until morning." Jian-yu closed his eyes, just for a moment. When he opened them, they were bright, and he didn't try to hide it. "That sentence is the reason I'm alive," and he said. "That voice is the reason I'm standing here. Not because I think you need saving, but because you saved me. And I have carried that debt every single day for 9 years." Naomi leaned against the doorframe. The fight went out of her, not because she lost it, but because she set it down. The anger. To the armor. The wall she had been holding up with both hands since Marcus walked back into her life. She let it rest, just for a moment, just long enough to breathe. "His name is Marcus," she said, quiet, raw, no preamble. "I was with him for 3 years. He never hit me. He never had to. He just talked and talked and talked until I forgot what my own voice sounded like, until I stopped disagreeing, until I stopped leaving the apartment, until I looked in the mirror and the woman looking back was someone I didn't recognize." Jian-yu didn't move. He listened the way he had listened in the restaurant, completely, like her voice was the only sound that existed. "I left him 6 years ago," Naomi continued. "I packed a bag at 2 o'clock in the morning, and I walked out, and I didn't look back. I rebuilt everything. The apartment, the job, Trinity's school, my name, my face, my voice." Her chin trembled once. She caught it. And then he walked into my kitchen and I froze. 8 minutes. He was there for 8 minutes and I became her again. The small version, the quiet version, the one he built. She looked at Jian-yu with eyes that were wet and furious and honest in a way she hadn't been with anyone in years. "That's why I can't do this," she said, "because letting someone in means giving them the power to make me small again. And I would rather be alone for the rest of my life than feel what I felt in that kitchen." The silence that followed was enormous. It filled the hallway the way silence fills a room after someone says the truest thing they've ever said. Heavy, sacred, the kind of quiet you don't break because breaking it would be a kind of violence. Jian-yu looked at her. She looked at him. Two people standing in a hallway with every wall between them, finally on the ground. "You're not small, Naomi," he said. "You have never been small, not 9 years ago, not in that diner, not now." She pressed her lips together hard. A single tear fell. She wiped it fast, angry at it for existing. They stood there for a long time. Neither moved, neither spoke. The building hummed around them. The light from her apartment turned the hallway gold. Then Naomi stepped aside. Not all the way, just enough. Just enough to let him through if he wanted to come in. Just enough to say what her voice couldn't. Jian-yu stepped inside. She closed the door behind him. They sat at her kitchen table. No tea, no food, no pretense. Just two people in a quiet apartment with nothing between them except the truth. And for the first time in 9 years, neither of them was sitting alone. Trinity called her from school on a Tuesday. Her voice was wrong, not scared exactly. Trinity had too much of their father in her to sound scared, but tight, controlled. And the voice of a girl trying very hard to sound like a woman. "He was outside the school," Trinity said, "just standing there by the fence. He didn't say anything. He just looked at me." Naomi's hand tightened around her phone until the case creaked. She was standing in the break room at Hanoi. She had come back to work 5 days after the night in the hallway, without explanation, without apology, and Jian-yu hadn't asked for either. She pressed her back against the wall and closed her eyes and felt something move through her body that wasn't fear. It was fury, not the shaking, helpless kind she felt when Marcus stood in her kitchen. Not the kind that turned inward and became shame. This was different. This was clean. This was the anger of a woman who had survived everything a man could do to her spirit and had one line left that could not be crossed. He had crossed it. "Go inside," she told Trinity. "Stay in the building." "I'm coming." She didn't call Jian-yu. She didn't tell anyone where she was going. She took off her apron, folded it on the break room counter, walked out the back door, and took the train across the city with her jaw set and her hands still in her lap, and a calm settling over her that she recognized. It was the same calm from the diner, the same stillness that came when the gun was in her face, the place inside her that went quiet when everything else was loud. Not because she was numb, but because she had already decided what she was going to do, and there was nothing left to be afraid of. She found Marcus 4 blocks from the school. He was leaning against his car like a man with nowhere to be, relaxed, easy, that same smile, that same posture that said the world was his, and everyone in it was just borrowing space. He saw her coming, and his smile widened. He opened his mouth to speak, to deliver whatever version of charm or control or casual cruelty he had prepared. And Naomi stopped 6 feet in front of him and spoke first. "You don't get to talk," she said. Her voice was level, steady, the voice from the diner, the voice that made a robber lower his gun, the voice that had been buried under 3 years of Marcus's weight and had clawed its way back out and was standing now in the open air, unbroken. "You came to my home. I let that go. That was my mistake. But you do not come near my sister. You do not stand outside her school. Well, you do not exist in the same space as her. Not today, not ever." Marcus's smile faded. Not all at once, in stages. The way a man's confidence leaves when he realizes the person in front of him is not the person he remembers. "Naomi, I'm not finished." She didn't raise her voice. She didn't need to. "The woman you knew is gone. You didn't kill her. She outgrew you. And the woman standing here right now will take apart everything you have. Your name, your reputation, every corner of your life. If you come near Trinity again," she paused, "I don't need a man to do it. I don't need money. I don't need help. I just need you to look at me and understand that I mean every word I'm saying." She held his gaze. She didn't blink. She didn't waver. She stood on that sidewalk with the wind pulling at her jacket and the noise of the city around them, and she let him see exactly who she was. Not the girl he met when she was 22 and grieving and vulnerable. Not the woman who flinched in her kitchen 8 days ago. This one, the one who was done. Marcus looked at her for a long time. His jaw worked. His hands flexed at his sides. He searched her face for the crack. The one he always found. The one he always pressed until it opened. He searched and found nothing. He got in his car. He drove away. He didn't look back. Naomi stood on the sidewalk and breathed. In and out, slow, steady. The adrenaline hit 5 seconds later. A wave that started in her knees and climbed to her chest. And she absorbed it, standing up, because she was done falling down. She turned around and Jian-yu was there, not close, across the street, leaning against a wall with his hands in his pockets the way he leaned against everything. Like the world could take its time because he wasn't going anywhere. He wasn't walking toward her. He wasn't checking on her. He was just there, present, visible. And a man standing in the background of someone else's victory because he understood the difference between fighting for someone and being there after. Naomi looked at him across the street. He looked back. The city moved between them. Cars, people, noise, life, and neither of them moved. She crossed the street. She stopped in front of him, and she didn't say thank you. She didn't explain. She didn't ask how he knew where she was or why he came or what he heard. She said, "Never, do you want to get coffee?" Jian-yu's face did something it almost never did. The corner of his mouth moved. Not a full smile. Not yet. The same almost from 9 years ago. The same almost from the night she corrected him in front of his staff. The same almost that lived in the space between who he was and who he was becoming. "Yeah," he said, "I do." They walked into a cafe together. Not a diner. Not the one from the robbery. Not the one from 9 years ago. A cafe. Small. Warm. In the kind of place with mismatched chairs and art on the walls and coffee that actually tasted good. Naomi ordered. Jian-yu paid. They sat by the window. The rain had started outside. It streaked the windows the same way it had 9 years ago in a different place in a different city. When a girl who was too young to be that kind sat across from a stranger who was too broken to ask for help. She didn't remember his face from that night, but she remembered the feeling, the pull that said, Sit down." The quiet voice inside her that said, "Stay." The instinct that told her a person across a table was worth an hour of her time, even when she had nothing to spare. That instinct was still there. It had survived everything. Her parents' death, Marcus, the years of silence, the rebuilding. It survived because it was the truest part of her, the part that no one could take. Jian-yu drank his coffee. Naomi drank hers. They didn't talk about Marcus. They didn't talk about the diner. And they didn't talk about the 9 years between then and now. They talked about small things. A customer at the restaurant who had proposed the night before and knocked over 3 glasses in the process. A book Naomi was reading. A song Jian-yu couldn't get out of his head. They talked like 2 people who had just met, and like 2 people who had known each other their entire lives. 3 weeks passed. Naomi came to work. Jian-yu came to work. They existed in the same space the way they always had. Professional, courteous, careful. But something had shifted. The wall was still there, but it had a door now. And sometimes, late at night when the restaurant was closed and the staff had gone home, Jian-yu would come downstairs and Naomi would still be wiping tables. And he would sit, and she would finish. And they would talk about nothing, or they wouldn't talk at all. And the silence between them was no longer empty. It was full and heavy with things unsaid, things that were waiting for the right moment to be spoken. On a Thursday night, 6 weeks after the confrontation with Marcus, Naomi finished her shift and found Jian-yu waiting by the back door. "Walk you home?" he asked. It was the first time he'd asked. She looked at him for a long moment. Then she nodded. They walked side by side through the city, not touching, not talking, just walking. The streets were loud, cars honking, people shouting. Winnie, the hum of a city that never slept. But between them, it was quiet. When they reached her building, Naomi stopped at the bottom of the stairs. "Thank you," she said. "For what?" "For not trying to fix me." Jian-yu looked at her, really looked at her. The way he had looked at her in the diner 9 years ago. The way he had looked at her in the hallway outside her apartment. The way he had looked at her across the street after she confronted Marcus. With attention, with patience. None with the quiet certainty of a man who had spent 9 years waiting for something and was willing to wait 9 more. "You were never broken," he said. Naomi's breath caught. She looked away, at the street, at the lights, at anything except his face. Because if she looked at him, she would say something she wasn't ready to say. "Good night, Jian-yu," she said. "Good night, Naomi." She walked up the stairs. She didn't look back. But when she reached her apartment and looked out the window, he was still standing there, looking up. And when their eyes met through the glass, something passed between them. Not words, not promises, just recognition. The beginning of something that neither of them had a name for yet, but that they both felt. 2 months after the diner robbery, Naomi's life had settled into a rhythm. She worked at Hanol. She came home to Trinity. She paid her bills. She slept through the night without waking up in a cold sweat. Marcus hadn't come back, hadn't called, hadn't shown up outside Trinity's school. He was gone, really gone. In a way he hadn't been for 6 years. And Naomi could breathe again. She could breathe, and she could think, and she could feel things that weren't fear or rage or the bone-deep exhaustion of survival. She could feel hope. It was small, fragile, the kind of thing that could be crushed with a word. But it was there. On a Saturday night, after her shift ended, Naomi found Jian-yu in his office. He was standing by the window, looking out at the city below. She knocked on the glass door. He turned. "Can I come in?" she asked. "Always." She stepped inside. She closed the door behind her. They stood on opposite sides of the room, the desk between them, the city lights behind him. "I've been thinking," Naomi said. "About?" "About that night, 9 years ago." Jian-yu went very still. "I don't remember your face," Naomi continued, "but I remember why I sat down. I saw you through the window and you looked like someone who was running out of reasons. And I thought, if I don't go in there, no one will." She paused. "I didn't do it because I thought you needed saving. I did it because I thought you needed someone to sit with you, to remind you that you weren't alone, even if it was just for an hour." Jian-yu's hands were in his pockets. His jaw was tight. His eyes were bright. "That's what you did for me," Naomi said. "When Marcus came back, when I froze, when I forgot who I was. You didn't try to fix me. You didn't try to save me. You just sat with me. And you reminded me I wasn't alone." She took a step forward. "I'm not good at this," she said. "At letting people in. At trusting. At believing that kindness doesn't come with a price. Marcus took that from me, and I've spent 6 years trying to get it back." Another step. "But I think," her voice wavered, "I think I'm ready to try." Jian-yu didn't move. He was afraid. Afraid that if he moved, if he spoke, if he breathed too loudly, she would change her mind. "I'm not asking for anything," Naomi said. "I'm not asking for promises or labels or anything that feels too big. I'm just asking if maybe we could keep doing this. The tea, the silence, the walking home, and see where it goes." She stopped 3 feet in front of him. "Because I think," she swallowed hard, "I think I'd like to know where it goes." Jian-yu looked at her, and for the first time since she met him, he smiled. Not the almost smile, not the hint of something, a real smile, the kind that reached his eyes, the kind that made him look younger, the kind that said he had been waiting for this moment for 9 years, and it was better than he'd imagined. "I'd like that too," he said. Naomi exhaled, and the fragile, tentative thing between them became real. They took it slow, slower than slow. They had coffee. They walked. They talked. Jian-yu met Trinity. Trinity liked him, which was saying something because Trinity didn't like anyone. "He's quiet," Trinity said one night after Jian-yu left. "But it's not a bad quiet. It's like he's listening even when no one's talking." Naomi smiled. "Yeah, it is. You like him." "I do." "Does he know?" "I think so." "Good." 3 months in, Jian-yu took her to a gallery opening, not because he liked art, but because she mentioned once, in passing, that she used to love galleries before Marcus made her feel like her opinions were stupid. They walked through the exhibit. Naomi talked, Jian-yu listened, and when they left, he didn't ask if she had a good time. He already knew. 4 months in, Naomi invited him to dinner at her apartment. Trinity cooked. Naomi set the table. Jian-yu brought wine and flowers and a book for Trinity because he remembered she mentioned liking historical fiction. They ate, they laughed. And they talked about everything and nothing. And when Jian-yu left, Trinity looked at Naomi and said, "You should keep him." Naomi laughed. "I'm working on it." 5 months in, Naomi kissed him. It was late. They were walking home from the restaurant. The city was quiet. The streets were empty. They stopped at a crosswalk, waiting for the light, and Naomi looked at him, at the way he stood, at the way he looked at her. At the way he had been looking at her for 9 years, without ever asking for anything in return. And she kissed him. It was soft, tentative, the kind of kiss that asks a question instead of making a statement. When she pulled back, Jian-yu's eyes were closed. He opened them slowly, and he smiled. "I've been waiting for that," he said. "I know," she said. "Was it worth it?" "Yes." He kissed her back, slower, deeper, the kind of kiss that answers the question. And when they finally pulled apart, they were both breathing hard. "Come upstairs," Naomi said. It wasn't a question. Jian-yu nodded. They went upstairs. Trinity was at a friend's house. The apartment was empty. Naomi closed the door behind them. She locked it. She turned to face him. And for the first time in 6 years, she let someone in. Not just into her apartment, into the places she'd kept locked, the places she'd guarded, the places Marcus had tried to take, and she'd spent 6 years rebuilding. She let Jian-yu in. And he was gentle, careful, patient. He touched her like she was something precious, something rare, something that could break if he wasn't careful. He kissed her like he'd been waiting 9 years to do it right. And when they finally came together, it wasn't desperate or rushed or frantic. It was slow, deliberate, the way everything between them had always been. Afterward, they lay in her bed with the city lights coming through the window and the sound of traffic below. And Naomi's head was on his chest. His hand was in her hair. "I was so scared," she said quietly. "Of what?" "Of this. Of letting you in. Of what it would feel like if you left." Jian-yu's hand stilled. I'm not leaving, he said. You say that now. I'll say it tomorrow, and the day after, and every day until you believe me. Naomi closed her eyes. A tear slipped down her cheek. Not from sadness, from relief. I think I'm starting to, she whispered. Jian-yu held her tighter, and they stayed like that until they fell asleep. 6 months after the diner robbery, Naomi stood in front of the mirror in her bedroom. She was wearing a dress, simple, black, elegant. Trinity stood behind her, adjusting the zipper. You look beautiful, Trinity said. I look nervous. You are nervous, but you still look beautiful. Naomi smiled. There was a knock at the door. Trinity went to answer it. Naomi heard voices. Jian-yu's low, Trinity's higher. Then Trinity called out, "Oh, he's here!" Naomi took a breath. She looked at herself one more time. The woman in the mirror looked different than she had 6 months ago. Stronger, steadier, whole. She walked out of the bedroom. Jian-yu was standing in the living room. He was wearing a suit, dark, perfectly tailored. He looked like he'd stepped out of a magazine. But when he saw her, his face did something she'd never seen before. It softened, completely. Like every wall he'd ever built came down in that moment. Hi, she said. Hi, he said. They stood there looking at each other. Trinity cleared her throat. Okay, you two are gross. Get out of here. Naomi laughed. She grabbed her purse. She kissed Trinity on the cheek. Don't wait up. Wasn't planning on it. Jian-yu took her to a restaurant on the top floor of a building overlooking the city. It was beautiful, intimate, the kind of place where every table felt like the only table. They ordered, they ate, they talked. And somewhere between the appetizer and dessert, Naomi realized something. She was happy, not the fragile, tentative happiness of someone afraid to feel too much, but real happiness, the kind that settled deep in your chest and stayed. What are you thinking about? Jian-yu asked. She looked at him. I'm thinking about how 9 years ago, I sat across from a stranger in a diner and told him to wait until morning, and how that stranger turned out to be you. Jian-yu reached across the table, and he took her hand. I'm glad it was you, he said. Me too. I have something for you, he said. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small box. Naomi's heart stopped. It's not what you think, he said quickly. Or maybe it is. I don't know. I'm not good at this. He opened the box. Inside was a key. It's to my apartment, he said. I'm not asking you to move in. Not yet. But I'm asking if maybe you'd like to have it, in case you ever want to. Come over, or stay, or just know that you have a place that's yours. Naomi stared at the key, then at him. I know it's fast, he said, and I know you need time, but I also know that I've spent 9 years carrying you in my chest, and now that I have you, I don't want to waste another second pretending I'm not all in. Naomi's throat was tight. I'm all in, Naomi, he said. I have been since the moment you sat across from me in that diner, and I will be for as long as you'll let me. She took the key. So she looked at it, small, silver, ordinary, but it felt like the world. I'm all in too, she said quietly. Jian-yu smiled, and for the first time in 6 years, Naomi felt like she was exactly where she was supposed to be. A year after the diner robbery, a video resurfaced online. The same shaky footage, the same masked gunman, the same woman standing behind the counter with her hands at her sides and her voice steady. But this time, the caption was different. 1 year ago, this waitress stayed calm during a robbery. Today, she owns the restaurant. Because she did. Jian-yu had given her half of Hanoi, not because he thought she needed it, but because he thought she deserved it, and because he wanted her to know that the life they were building together was exactly that. Together. The video went viral again. 15 million views this time. But Naomi didn't watch it. She was too busy running the restaurant, managing the staff, planning the menu. And at the end of every night, when the last customer left and the lights came up, Jian-yu would come downstairs and she would finish wiping tables. And they would sit together in the empty restaurant and they would talk about nothing, or they wouldn't talk at all. And the silence between them was no longer empty. It was full of everything they'd been through, everything they'd survived, everything they'd built, and everything that was still to come. One night, 2 years after the robbery, Naomi stood behind the counter of Hanul and looked out at the dining room. It was full, busy, loud with laughter and conversation. And she thought about the woman she'd been 2 years ago, the woman who stood behind a different counter in a different restaurant and looked at a gunman and didn't flinch. That woman had been brave, but she'd also been alone. This woman, the one standing here now, was still brave, but she wasn't alone anymore. She looked up at the fourth floor, through the glass walls of the office. Jian-yu was sitting at his desk, working. But he must have felt her looking because he glanced up. Their eyes met. He smiled. She smiled back. And in that moment, Naomi understood something she hadn't understood 2 years ago. Strength wasn't about standing alone. It was about knowing when to let someone stand with you. She had spent 6 years rebuilding herself after Marcus, 6 years learning to be whole on her own. And that was important, essential, the foundation of everything. But this, what she had with Jian-yu, wasn't about him completing her. It was about two whole people choosing each other. Every day, not because they needed to, but because they wanted to. The door to the restaurant opened. A customer walked in. Naomi straightened. She grabbed a menu. "Good evening," she said. "Welcome to Hanul." And she meant it. Welcome to the life she'd built, the life she'd fought for, the life she'd reclaimed, the life that was hers and his and theirs. If this story moved you, if you felt every moment, then do 3 things. Like this video, subscribe so you never miss the next one, and share it with someone who needs to believe in love again. So, drop a comment telling me what hit you hardest. You're not just watching, you're family now, and family shows up for each other. Hopefully we'll see tomorrow with another story that'll make you feel everything. Welcome home.